Chapter 127. 3. Could they be related? Lass, I'll be completely honest with you. The gray-robed man suddenly turned serious, his face stern as he said, Mom. Qing Yu arched up an eyebrow, seemingly curious to hear what he had to say. The gray-robed man hesitated a moment, like he was a little embarrassed to say it. It was only after a good while that he then opened his mouth. Those two fellas there had actually fallen victim to underhanded tactics from their enemies. They were drugged with extremely strong aphrodisiac, and the effects were really fierce. I had thought to find them two women to resolve the whole thing, but as our Lord keeps a very tight rein on us, forbidding us to womanize around, so I had no choice but to bring them here to soak themselves in the cold water for a night. They will be fine when the effects of the drugs wear off. The two people in the water were unjustly accused once again, but they could not say a single word. Why did they have to be drafted to come out with that fella to carry out this mission? And here they are being wrongfully accused with such an outrageous lie? Damn it. Really do not feel like enduring it any longer. I really want to hit someone so much now. Hearing that, Qing Yu's expression was rather taken aback, and she then revealed a mysterious smile. Is that so? Bring them up here, and they'll be rightfully fine once I prick a few needles into them to disperse the effects of the drug. It is not good for their health to be immersed in such chilly waters in the dead of the night. Those words of concern almost made the two men want to weep. This young lady's heart is as beautiful as she looks. But right in the very next second, the gray-robed man's words almost made them explode on the spot. They heard him laugh deviously, and he then waved his hand in an offhand manner. No need, no need. They have hides thick as an elephant, and they are enjoying themselves in the water. You do not need to care about them. Really, just go back first. I guarantee that they will not do anything bad in here. You are the one with skin thicker than an elephant. Who can be more sneaky and shameless than you? If their stares could kill, the gray-robed man would have died 1,001 times by now. Seeing him say that, Qing Yu did not insist, but just raised up an eyebrow skeptically and said, Do as you wish then. Till the figure of the young lady had walked a far distance away. The gray-robed man then heaved a great sigh of relief, before he turned to see the two of them in the water, staring malevolently at him. Aren't the two of you going to come up already? If not for me, the two of you would have been exposed, so why are you staring at me like that for? Upon hearing that, the two of them leapt out from the lake, and said with an insincere smile, Then we must really thank you so much for covering for us. No problem at all. We're one big family anyway, no need to stand on ceremony with me. The gray-robed man answered with a toothy grin. But in the very next second, two indistinct shadows flashed before his eyes, speeding at a very fast speed towards his face, accompanied by a powerful rush of wind. Bam! Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU bam! The loud sounds of two vicious strikes landed. Ow, are you guys rebelling here? Haha, we've wanted to hit you for such a long time. Just like that, the two people who had slaved for a good part of the night under the beck and call of that fella went back proudly after completing their mission, while the gray-robed man behind them sported two highly striking-looking black eyes, his face angry and shocked. Chapter 127. For could they be related? Gathered Cloudloft. Any news? A tall and thin figure among the others stepped forward and said respectfully, My lord, we searched for a very long time in that lake, but did not discover any unnatural fluctuation. Hence, I am guessing that Ling Shu's deduction is wrong, which caused us to come back empty-handed. Ling Shu is that gray-robed man's name. Seemingly sloppy and nonchalant with a laxital attitude, always lazing around like there were no bones in his body. To think that he would have such a gentle and pleasing-sounding name. Did you search carefully? Bai Jiyan was just striding in through the door. Although Ling Shu does not exactly exemplify reliability as one of his strengths, but he had never once dropped the hammer when the situation calls for it. The search for the spirit soul can only be done by that pair of yin-yang eyes of his that are able to see these supernatural bodies. Hearing those words, the faces of the two people turned indignant, and they then said rather hatefully, But that fella only made us search here and there in the water, while he just lay there snoring comfortably in sleep, accomplishing nothing. Moreover, we were discovered as well. Bai Ziyan's eyebrow lifted in surprise. How did you guys come to be discovered? The other party must have heard noises. It was an extremely beautiful young lady, and Ling Shu seemed to be on rather familiar terms with her as well. It's Qingyu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It dawned on Bai Ziyan, and his eyes then glanced probingly towards Lu Junyao seated straight-backed on his chair. The man's face looked like it had always been, the penetrating and alluring pair of violet eyes slightly narrowed, and no one knew what was going through his mind. Bai Ziyan's eyes flashed with a glint. Actually, I am rather curious why the place Ling Shu is investigating into would turn out to be where that last Qingyu is living in. Could there be any related link behind it? Hearing that, Lu Junyao gathered back his wandering thoughts and looked at him, his gaze darkening slightly. Actually, I have suspected it more than once. The origins of that little fox's birth, her unsurpassed gift in medicine, and her mysterious martial skills and techniques, they are all unfitting of a person from these low-level lands. This is a point that is truly very suspicious. As she is truly an unparalleled prodigy, one you would not even be able to see even in 100 years here in these low-leveled lands, without any excellent resources available to her, or any highly skilled expert to guide her. She can only be said to be innately endowed. Bai Ziyan quipped in agreement. Luo Junyao affirmed with a grunt, and then went on to say slowly, highly skilled experts are as numerous as clouds in cloud heaven, and hidden reclusive sages are extremely rare in there. Among the skilled and powerful women, Aunt Lan could be considered to be the most sensational one in cloud heaven many years ago. The heavens tribulation that struck back then killed countless people, and it was all to her credit that turned the catastrophe around, which gained her the strong respect from everyone. But her time spent in cloud heaven was merely a short 30 years, and people have slowly come to forget her. Chapter 128. 1. Person with the heavenly phoenix mark. Upon hearing that, Bai Ziyan's face showed a rare moment of depression. That incident greatly astounded the entire cloud heaven back then. Just as you said, Aunt Lan was so powerful, so how could she pass on so young so mysteriously to the extent? He did not finish his words as what came at the back had really been too cruel. That person did not only have her soul torn asunder, but even her flesh body had suffered severe harm. And pitiful could not even begin to describe what happened to her. Lu Junyao had very nearly embarked on a raging massacre, but his heart had been focused on only one thing back then, to revive that person. He had spent several hard years' time before he managed to preserve that person's flesh body in an unblemished state. Aunt Lan possessed unfathomably profound skills in medicine as well, her attainment able to revive the dead and grow flesh on bare bones. Hence her fame as the divine healer extraordinaire in cloud heaven. When he came to mention that, Lu Junyao then paused as he turned to look at Bai Ziyan. Have you ever been suspicious why someone like the little fox who is from these low-level lands is able to dispel voodoo poison and blood curses, that even a prodigy from the divine healer sect, that's rare to see in even 100 years like you is helpless against? Bai Ziyan felt like he had suddenly been struck by enlightenment. His beautiful peach blossom-like eyes widened up with incredulity. You mean to say that Qingyu could very possibly be a descendant of Aunt Lan? Although she does not look like Aunt Lan in the slightest, but that personality of hers is more or less the same, seemingly approachable and friendly, but is really cold and icy deep inside her bones. They're both also just as haughtily arrogant, and absolutely fearless as well. Lu Junyao reasoned slowly. Bai Ziyan then looked like he had come to understand something, and he then asked probingly, so it's because you have always suspected it, and that is why you are paying so much attention to her all this time? You can put it that way. Bai Ziyan then muttered under his breath to himself. So this is why. And I thought that you had some other intentions towards that lass. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although his voice had been very soft, but Lu Junyao still heard that. His mesmerizing violet eyes then flashed and he asked, what did you think it was? Bai Ziyan rubbed his nose and then said rather awkwardly, I had thought that you and that lass. Cough cough. What I mean are the kind of thoughts that a man would have towards a woman. He just had to drag the one problem that had plagued mankind since the beginning of time into it. Lu Junyao was speechless and complicated emotions passed over his handsome face, as his gaze rested on Bai Jiyan. I remember having told you before that the lass is only in her teens, and is just a child in my eyes. Based on age and seniority, I should be several generations her elder. How could I possibly have any kind of thoughts towards a child? Bai Jiyan still could not help but feel that the man was just finding excuses. Age? Cloud Heaven is filled with all kinds of 1,000-year-old freaks, and you can see them everywhere. For someone who has merely lived 200 years there like you, it is as good as being 20 years old in these low-level lands. And here you are making sound like you are really that old. Chapter 128. 2. Person with the heavenly phoenix mark. Lu Junyao looked at Bai Jiyan derisively. It's a fact I am older than you. Sheesh. Born just half a day earlier. And do you really have to always bring it up all the time? I will have to trouble you to watch over things in Cloud Heaven for a while. As we have been away for so long, it is unavoidable that issues will surely crop up. Lu Junyao then said to him. Bai Jiyan was stunned for a moment. Are you going somewhere? Lu Junyao affirmed. I intend to handle the matter about Aunt Lan myself. I do not know why, but I have been hearing her call out to me recently, and I just cannot put my heart at ease. He had been an orphan from young, and was cold-blooded and merciless. But in a corner of his heart that no one knew about, there was a tiny soft spot. That person had played a very important role in his life, and nothing was more important to him than resurrecting her at this point in time. If she had not died from that accident back then he would not have been tormented by that voodoo poison and blood curse for close to 100 years. It was at the most critical juncture when she was dispelling the curse for him that the accident occurred, which allowed the poison in his body to further flare up vehemently unsuppressed, turning him into someone who had been neither man nor ghost. There has got to be some hidden conspiracy behind all that. And since he has fully recovered, then he would definitely uncover the entire truth behind it all. The man's mysterious violet eyes seemed to be brewing with a terrifying storm, giving that flawlessly handsome face that must have been crafted by the gods, the envy of both deities and mortals, a look that would make one feel both oppressed and suffocating. Bai Jiyan's face turned dark. He knew that this man was one who had always willfully done as he pleased, and had never let any worry hold him back, because he just did not care. But when he became serious, he would persist all the way to frightening extents. And the way he looked right at that moment showed that he was becoming serious, and his true colors were about to shine through. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Maybe after having laid dormant for so many years, the chaos brewing under the surface for so many years, around was great change was due in Cloud Heaven. Ever since the unexpected accident that occurred back in Hell's Canyon, Qin Fong had not arranged for them to go outside for training anymore, but just worked on reinforcing their knowledge in the subject of strengthening their cultivation. He was once one of the highly respected teachers in the Faint Mist sect 10 years ago, though the changes over a period of 10 years in the Faint Mist sect had probably made it a very different place. But such knowledge is fixed and unchanging, so this was one area that would not differ by all that much. There are many different professions throughout these lands, but the most widely known ones by the people are these four: martial artists, elixir cultivators, artifact cultivators and spirit masters, and we'll not talk about the other rarer professions first. The Faint Mist sect is segregated into 5 different departments. Besides the 4 professions I just mentioned, there is another special department that takes in an extremely small number of disciples of very rare professions. The number of people in that whole department could be as few as 10, but every single one of them are all highly skilled experts with hidden talents. Chapter 128. 3. Person with the heavenly phoenix mark. Qing Yu listened intently with interest, and then suddenly opened her mouth to ask, Senior, though you have left the Faint Mist sect for so many years, I wonder if you have heard of the people currently holding the top 5 ranks? When those words of her came out, Qing Bei turned to look thoughtfully at her. Yan Shiwu and Yan Shiro were a little surprised beside them, not knowing why she would ask such a question. Qin Fong was slightly taken aback when he heard that question, and he then lifted his head up slightly to answer. I have heard about them. The few of them were just a bunch of greenhorns barely weaned off from milk back then. But they were able to stand taller than others in the crowd on their own, their brilliance shining exceptionally bright. Back at that time, the big brother among that group, Feng Tianheng, though only 15 years old and none of the teachers dared to accept him as their student. That kid was just too intelligent, and his gift was just too astounding. It could be said that the other few ranked just under him grew up under his very own hand, and every single one of them are now all incredible people. When talking about those people, Qin Feng was full of praise for them, and his words seemed to speak of an untold liking and admiration for that person. That kid Feng Tianheng seldom shows his face, and the Faint Mist Sect's special department was established by him alone. He is now also one of the extremely rare puppet masters throughout the lands. Puppet master. Qing Yu's expression suddenly seemed a little distracted, like she had suddenly just remembered something, and her mind was not there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But he has not been in the Faint Mist Sect for many years already. On important occasions throughout the years, like the grand internal trials and competition meets among the sects, he has never once appeared, and only the other few have shown their faces. But for this upcoming recruitment trials of new disciples, all of you are in luck. It is said that Feng Tianheng will be coming to take charge of the event. His position in the Faint Mist Sect is more than extraordinary, and he is the only one exception among all the countless disciples in the history of the Faint Mist Sect to hold a position equivalent to the 12 elders. If you are fortunate enough to be able to meet him, make sure you can become acquainted with him at least. When Yan Shiwu heard that, her mind was already imagining about Feng Tianheng on her own. This person is so young and well accomplished, and he has such a nice-sounding name. He must be an extremely good-looking man, if she has a chance to know him. But right at that moment, another icy jade smooth countenance carved by hands of the gods jumped into her mind, the pair of mysterious and regal violet eyes looking so haughty and tyrannical, as they gazed upon the world with disdain, so very heart-stirring. A shiver ran through Yan Shiwu and her face flushed slightly red, feeling a little vexed. To think that she was thinking such thoughts out here in the middle of the day. Really? But thinking about it, Qing Yu seemed to be on rather good terms with that person and... Her eyes then sneakily peeked at the young lady listening intently. From this angle, she could only see the side profile of her face, but it was already so flawlessly exquisite that there was nothing she could pick on. Her long slanted eyes were languidly half-closed, an indescribably alluring sight. Chapter 128. 4. Person with the heavenly phoenix mark. Yan Shiwu suddenly felt her heart inexplicably stuffed up for no reason, her gaze turning mournful. Why did that man have to choose to be on such good terms with Qing Yu? If it was some other person, she might be able to give a little competition. But when it's Qing Yu, she was really beginning to feel that the disparity between them was just much too far apart, and there was absolutely no possibility at all. That was something that any clear-eyed person would be able to see. Back when they went through round after round of unimaginable danger in Hell's Valley, it was Qing Yu who protected them the entire way. The jealousy she had felt in her heart in the beginning had slowly disappeared, and what she felt towards her now was only admiration and gratitude. The weak and timid little girl who had been so unremarkable and lowly born from a concubine just several years ago, had actually now transformed to become so dazzling and of unmatchable talent. As for herself, it was feared that she would not change at all if she was in her shoes, even if she was given several more years. The person she worshipped the most in the past was Yen Ning Luo, who was not only the greatest female prodigy in the Green Wave Kingdom, she was also born beautiful, and held a highly noble title of Princess Ning Feng, bestowed upon her by the emperor with a good 1/3 of the entire male population that wanted to marry her. She had more suitors than one could count from a very young age, and had the best of everything there was. Hence she really couldn't even begin to start feeling jealous of her from the start. People were always like that. One would feel jealous of a person who was better than themselves, but would not be jealous of people who were more outstanding than them, by really too much. If it was due to Yen Ning Luo's noble status, and no lack of suitors that had subdued Yan Shiwu, then it was the moment that she had still come to save them at the risk of her own life, that convinced her for Qingyu. Because if it was anyone else, no one would want to save a person who had nothing but hatred for them. But Qingyu had done just that. From that moment on, Yan Shiwu's heart had changed by a lot, and she had unconsciously changed in some other areas as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, for example, when she was undergoing training in cultivation, she discovered that her absolutely useless spirit aptitude and elemental powers before had turned from being abysmal to gaining true aptitude, and the speed she progressed at became quite a lot faster. On the other side, Qingyu was focused on listening and did not notice that Yan Shiwu had been watching her for quite a long while. An Qinfang was at that moment speaking about the internal layout of the Faint Mist sect, which included a few dangerous places where entry was forbidden, and he had naturally come to mention about the Heaven's Door Chamber they had first heard of back at the Lost Fogs the other day. It was said that the place was among the top 3 places in the Faint Mist sect, where entry was strictly prohibited, and was only open to those with powerful and profound cultivation. Disciples with weak and low levels of cultivation were not even allowed to go near the place, as it would be hard for them to find their way out. Moreover, there was something strange in the Heaven's Door Chamber that sucked at a person's soul. It was rumored that since the Faint Mist sect's founding till today, only a very rare few people had been able to go inside the Heaven's Door Chamber and come out completely safe and sound, and the Faint Mist sect's first-ranked Feng Tianheng had already gone in there once, when he was just 10 years old. Chapter 129. 1. Matters related to the recruitment trials. Having heard till that point, Qingyu had come to develop a tinge of curiosity about this person. Having seen how powerful the two people, Su Liemo and Luo Lanji, had been that day, then what kind of level would the first-ranked Feng Tianheng of the Inner Circle disciples and the founder of the special department have possibly attained? This trip to the Faint Mist sect was really becoming more and more interesting. After Qin Fang gave them a brief introduction to the layout in the Faint Mist sect, he then went on to more important things. It will be the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials in a month's time, and on that day, not only just the Faint Mist sect, but both the Limitless sect and the Carefree Valley will also be looking to take in new blood. And there were preceding examples where the other sects had tried to fight for disciples with the Faint Mist sect in previous years. Since all of you have chosen the Faint Mist sect, do not waver in your resolve. Although the other 2 sects are said to be not too bad as well, but they still cannot compare to the Faint Mist sect. Qin Fang's words were protective of the Faint Mist sect, and his tone was stern as he said that. It was not until the few of them had nodded their heads in agreement that his demeanor softened a little, and he continued to say, "The conditions for admission into the trials are one must firstly be between 14 to 30 years of age, and unmarried young men and ladies." When he spoke about that, Qin Fang came to show a rare instance of slight embarrassment, as he coughed slight a couple of times. I think that all of you will know by now that the Faint Mist sect's rules and regulations are very stringent, where they strictly forbid any of their disciples to revel in drinking and debauchery, and reject disciples who covet a life of riches and luxury. One must be upright, and although the Constellation continent is highly liberal and open-minded, one of the most stringently upheld rule in the Faint Mist sect is that all their unmarried disciples must remain chaste and untainted. Qin Fang was already over 50 and coming close to 60 this year, but in order for him to cultivate some special martial arts techniques, he had not gotten married and did not have any children. He was to this day still a virgin, and speaking to his juniors about these things here today was inadvertently a little embarrassing for him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that Qingyu merely raised an eyebrow, but did not show any other different reaction. But the ears of the youth next to her turned red, and both Yan Shiwu and Yan Shiro looked rather embarrassed, as they were after all young maidens who were yet married. Quickly brushing off the topic that was a little too embarrassing to speak of, Qin Fang quickly went on to say, the recruitment trials would naturally include a test of one's gift. The gift-sorting rock in the Faint Mist sect is huge, and hence the amount of energy it can withstand is much greater as well. So when the time comes for you to be tested, do not hide or suppress your real strength. Only when you show your brilliance and attract their attention will you then have more opportunities and choices to choose from. Those words were hidden with deep meaning, like they were specifically spoken for Qingyu's sake. Ever since Qingyu was discovered to have hidden her powers, Qin Feng had constantly sought to test her both secretly and openly, but had never been successful. The lass had really kept it so deeply hidden, without revealing any clues, which made it completely impossible to even guess. Qingyu had naturally been able to catch it, and her lips curled up in a smile before she replied, "Rest assured, Senior. All of us will surely give it our very best." Chapter 129. 2. Matters related to the recruitment trials. Hearing that, Qin Feng then nodded his head in satisfaction. After the level of your gift and talents have been tested, you will then select your area of expertise and go through another round of trials, where you'll then be allocated to one of the 5 departments. A representative would be chosen from each of those departments to be an examiner, and once you manage to pass that stage, then you can consider yourself to have formally passed the admission. Having spoken up till here, he had almost told them everything there was to tell. Qin Feng looked at Yan Shiwu and Yan Shiro and said, "Both of you will still have to work harder, or it will be hard for you to pass the gift testing stage. People like Qing Bei, who is a dual element wielder, need not worry at all, and as for Qingyu..." He paused a moment, thinking that she still had not revealed her true powers. Qingyu is also skilled in medicine, and there will be 2 departments for her to choose from at that time. What I am worried about will be the 2 of you. Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu lowered their heads, feeling a little ashamed of themselves. Seeing them like that, Qin Feng sighed. "In this remaining 1 month, I will do everything I can to bring up your powers, and both of you will have to work extra hard at it with me." The 2 of them then chorused in unison, We'll have to trouble Senior to work with us more." Qing Yu and Qing Bei found themselves left alone without anything much to do. With the kind of power they possessed, there was nothing much for Qin Feng to worry about. After giving them a little more instructions, he then allowed them to leave. "Sis, which department do you think we will be allocated into when we are accepted into the Faint Mist sect?" When he had heard Qin Feng explain about the various departments, he had already wanted to ask her this question. Hearing that, Qing Yu raised her eyes and looked at him. "What? You want to stick by my side?" Qing Bei scratched his head. "I just wanted to ask, that's all. It's all the same whether we are together or not, as we'll still be in the same sect, so we'll be able to see each other anytime anyway." Qing Yu's lips stiffened a brief moment before they arced up into a smile. "It is good that you think that way, as we will be segregated according to the things we are good at, and we might not be placed together. But even if I am not with you, with your current level of powers, no one will dare to bully you easily. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EUMM. Qing Bei nodded his head, and then went on to ask, "Then are you thinking of joining the Elixir Cultivator Department or the Martial Arts Department?" In actual fact, he really wanted to be placed together with Qingyu. Moreover, he has come to learn a little bit about elixir cultivation, so he might be able to bluff his way through in there. But when he saw the brief look of displeasure on Qingyu's face just now, the words that had been on the tip of his tongue were then quickly swallowed back down. Maybe Qingyu just wanted him to be more independent. When he was alone, he could be strong, resolute, and show unsurpassing wisdom. But after being with Qingyu for too long, he had grown to become so used to relying on her. Chapter 129. 3. Matters related to the recruitment trials. All things aside, it might have been because back in his most painful and agonizing days when he was younger, where he had felt most utterly helpless, with the countless number of times that he had wanted to end his own life, when the torment from purging the poison became too much to bear, she had been the one who had always pulled him back from the edge of darkness, remaining by his side as he endured through the darkest years of his life. His heart just wanted to rely on her for no reason, as that was the person he trusted the most, and the one and only kin he had. Seeing the look in the eyes of the youth change several times, Qingyu knew that he was deep in thought about things again. Her slender fingers were suddenly placed on top of his head, which ruffled his hair vigorously. It was probably because she had not done that action that warmed his heart for a rather long time, that caused the youth to freeze in his spot. It was said that a man's head was not to be carelessly touched, even for a man who was not yet fully grown, and it was naturally the same thing for Qing Bei. But every time he resisted, he would find his head violated even harder, and he became used to it over time. So when Qing Yu stopped ruffling his hair, he felt a little unused to it. Ever since they started to prepare themselves to join the Faint Mist sect, the two people had been working very hard to raise their powers, so he had not felt that heartwarming action for a rather long time. Qing Yu looked at the youth's doleful eyes like those of a tiny animal, and she stretched her hand out to ruffle his head another time. Did you think I was angry? Weren't you angry? Qing Bei pushed the question right back at her. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. Why should I be angry? Hearing that, Qing Yu hesitated a moment. If I am to go join the elixir cultivator department with you, you would not get angry? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What is there to be angry about? If you are able to get yourself in, then go ahead. Qing Yu said as she looked at him in amusement. Moreover, when did I ever say that I am going to the elixir cultivation department? With my knowledge in medicine, will I still need to go in there to learn anything? If she were to join the elixir cultivator department, it was undoubtedly just be a waste of time and energy for her. Compared to the things written in the heavenly insights of medicine, the medical practice in these lands were far inferior. Then are you intending to join the martial arts department? I heard that this department has the most number of people and 2/3 of the people throughout the lands are martial arts pugilists. So there are no lack of highly skilled experts in there. So it will be hard to gain attention and be favored in there. Qing Bei said after thinking about that for a while. Qing Yu shook her head, smiling as she said, I do not want to join either of these two. I am a little more interested in the Spirit Master Department, and that special department founded by the top-ranked disciple of the Inner Circle. Qing Bei blinked his eyes in surprise. The Spirit Master Department has very high requirements for one's mental strength, which is at least 10 times that of most normal people. As for that special department, it is said that there are not even 20 in numbers. 3 among the top 5 ranks are from the special department, while the other 2 has 1 artifact cultivator and a spirit master. I fear that it will be a little difficult for you to join these 2 departments. Chapter 129. 4. Matters related to the recruitment trials. So what? Qing Yu looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. If you do not go give it a try, how would you know you will not be able to pass? When she mentioned that, Qing Yu suddenly turned to look at him with a glint in her eyes. I feel that little Bei should go give being a spirit master a try, because you have very strong mental strength. Didn't you say that whenever you want to know about something, you just have to think about it, and it will automatically appear in your mind? That's right. Qing Bei nodded. Qing Yu went on to explain. You might not be aware, but that is one of the abilities of a spirit master. If you did not possess strong mental strength, you will not be able to have such a good sense of things. Qing Bei's eyes widened in disbelief, as he pointed a finger at himself in a baffled daze. Are you saying, I have the gift of being a spirit master? Qing Yu smiled and nodded. If that is really the case, then I must really go give it a try on the day of the recruitment trials. Qing Bei seemed to be greatly motivated, suddenly hoping that the day would come earlier. And on another side, Luo Junyao, who had been feeling a strange sense of unease in his heart, had come to discover the source of that unease. Tell it to me one more time. What do you mean by the person has gone missing? The man's low and alluringly magnetic voice sounded like a curse sent down by the gods, piercing deep into the ears of the person, who had his head bowed respectfully below. It was just a short statement made in a soft voice, but it caused the person to immediately fall to the ground on his knees. My lord, please quell your rage. Several of the lieutenants are already searching as hard as they can, and they will surely be able to find some clues. The person had steeled himself against the terrifying aura pressing down on him, and said in a trembling voice. The man with mesmerizing violet eyes then said scornfully in a chilling voice, If they are really able to handle it, then they would not have made you come report to me. The man's head sank down even lower, unable to find any words to say, because what the Lord said was true. It had already been more than half a month since the incident, and the few of them knew deep in their hearts that they were not able to hide it any longer. So they had ordered him to come down from cloud heaven and report the matter to seek for an opinion on a way for them to resolve it. Lu Junyao's tall figure suddenly straightened as he got up to his feet, the aura around him a little cryptic and his voice deep as he said, "I will deal with the matter myself. You go back and tell them to stop all the searches. Do not let any of the other powers notice a single thing." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although that man did not know what Lu Junyao meant by what he said, but he did not dare to say anything against him. There was nothing he could do but to go back and carry out his orders. Silence was restored back to the large room, and Lu Junyao stood there looking out at the scenery outside the window. Light and darkness intertwined within his eyes as a dark tide surged, like something was brewing up quietly within. Could it really be all so coincidental? The body in the dark regions had disappeared, and the cries he had recently heard calling out. Everything seemed to be vaguely conveying a certain message to him. A message that one did not dare to be certain of, but was already clear to see. Chapter 130. 1. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake, cloud heaven's western edge, headquarters of the barbarians. Because they lived in lands of vast roiling sandstorms, the barbarians have constructed tall towers that kept out the wind. For hundreds of years before this, their homeland had been swallowed up countless times by sandstorms which caused many deaths of their people. So the tribe chief had gotten craftsmen to carefully build these sandbreak towers, and they had not suffered any more casualties. The people of the tribe living in peace and remained detached from the world. You're awake. The flap of the tent was suddenly lifted, and a girl that was about 10 years old came walking in, lively and pretty looking, with 2 adorable braids on her hair. Her large sparkling eyes filled with joy as she looked at the person inside. Looking at the person seated upright in the bed, at first glance, she looked almost like a celestial being. Luxurious hair draped over her shoulders, against that fiery red clothes she was wearing. She was breathtakingly beautiful. She lifted her head when she heard that voice. The magnificently dazzling beauty of that flawless countenance was like that of a celestial being who had accidentally fallen into the mortal realm. Pure and pristine. Her limpid eyes so clear one couldn't possibly bear to profane them. A flawless beauty throughout, where even when her brows were creased in a frown like this, people just could not take their eyes off her. The little girl stared enraptured, and it was a good while before she regained her senses, looking a little embarrassed as she said, "Are you feeling unwell in any place? I am an elixir cultivator, and I can help to take a look at it for you." The woman's slightly vacant stare then slowly regained its focus, and her eyes then turned to look at the bashful little girl, who had her head lowered as she went on to say softly, "Were you the one who saved me? Thank you." Not only did the beautiful woman possess unforgettable looks, even her voice was highly enchanting, like jade beads falling onto a plate, lightly drumming on one's heart, that elicited a gentle ripple. 2 pink clouds immediately blossomed on the girl's tiny face. "No need for thanks. It's great that you're fine." Speaking about that, the little girl then looked at the woman with the astonished but measuring gaze. "When I rescued you and brought you back, your spirit body was so weak that you could barely be seen. So how did you even come to have gained a flesh body now?" Although she had not touched the lady, but it was clear to see that she possessed a solid flesh body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing that? The woman's gaze dimmed and her fair slender fingers rose up to gently touch her own cheek, seemingly far away in thought. She clearly remembered that her flesh body had been destroyed, broken into pieces, and horrifying to see. She couldn't really remember where she had been living all these years, and the reason she had died. Everything was a foggy blur, and there seemed to be a voice in her heart that told her she must not die. She must live as someone is waiting for her, and will always wait for her. But who is that person? She really cannot remember. Something felt like it exploded in her head, and the pain was excruciatingly painful. She raised her hands up to hold her head, trying her very best to suppress the agony. Chapter 130. 2. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. Are you all right? The little girl was shocked to see the woman like that, and she quickly went over to her. When she came to touch the woman's body, she discovered that her body was icy cold, without the slightest bit of warmth. The little girl was startled by the icy touch, and she immediately retracted her hand. That kind of temperature was like that of a dead person, but she could still clearly talk and move. She doesn't look like a dead person in any way. The little girl's pretty little face creased up, and she held the woman's hand as she injected her spirit energy into it. In the next instant, the little girl's eyes widened incredulously. How? There was only a weak puff of her main spirit soul in her body, and all the other parts of a spirit soul were missing. What kind of a person could possibly be so devoid of morals to be capable of doing something like this? It must be known that if one's spirit soul was deficient, they could easily lose their minds and become crazy. Or in a worst-case scenario, their lifespans would become greatly reduced, unable to live past several years. And though the woman did not show any signs of having lost her mind, but she seemed to be in a rather bad condition. Her body was so cold like she had been dead for a long time and the little girl then asked in a worried voice, "Do you remember who you are?" The woman who had her hands wrapped around her head was suddenly startled a moment before she slowly lifted her eyes up to look at the little girl. I am. Who is she? Fei Air, you must always remember me. Even if I am dead, you must not forget me. Whose voice is that? The woman was a little muddled. Is she Fei Air? Seeing the state the woman was in, how could one possibly not be able to see that her spirit soul was deficient? Although she was not crazy, but it was clear she had lost her memory of her past and could not remember her own identity. The little girl really didn't know whether it was a good thing to have saved the woman and brought her back here. The little girl then sighed slightly. Don't worry, I will definitely help you regain your memory. Although the barbarians were the least contentious tribe of people in Cloud Heaven, who peacefully kept to themselves within a confined region, but they were a race of people who have existed the longest here in these lands. There were many secret ancient techniques in the tribe, and it would not be too difficult for them to help her find back the lost fragments of her spirit soul. But there was just one hurdle that would be rather difficult to overcome. She had secretly brought this woman back without anyone's knowledge, and if she were to employ the tribe's secret technique, somebody would surely find out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU and Grandpa really did not like people who were not of their tribe, so if he knew that she had brought in an outsider, and had even used the secret technique to save her, not only she herself would be punished, but the woman would definitely not be able to survive as well. The little girl's eyes dimmed, and her gaze turned to look at the woman on the bed once again. Without knowing why, she just seemed to feel very close to the woman, and that was why she had secretly brought her back here. Regarding this matter, she would have to think up a foolproof plan first. It was already deep into the night, and a fluffy and fleshy ball of snow was lying upon the table, where its tiny legs would kick out a couple of times occasionally, while its tiny little mouth would then smack its lips together softly. Chapter 130. 3. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. It was only when she went closer that she discovered that the little fellow was plopped there soundly asleep, its delicate little mouth open like it was dreaming of something delicious to eat. A thin transparent sliver of drool was flowing out from the corner of its mouth, as it dripped with a soft patter, forming into a tiny puddle below. Qingyu shook her head in amusement, and she went over to carry the little fellow up. Although the little beast was asleep, but it was still alert as it quickly came awake. It was only when it smelled the familiar scent that it then let down its guard, to softly call out to its mother. Shush. Mother will carry you over to the soft lounge to sleep. It is too cold there on the table at night. Qingyu cooed in a gentle voice, and then put the little beast down on the soft lounge that was quite near to the bed, even covering a blanket over it. Although Meatball had a nice coat of fur to keep itself warm, and was not afraid of the cold, but the young lady's actions made the little beast feel highly touched. Its limpid wide blue eyes looked lovingly at her for a moment, but it could not fight off the dozy bug, its eyelids closing as it drifted back to sleep. The little beast was not as active and wild as most spirit beasts, but was obedient and quiet, usually either only eating or sleeping. What was strange was that it did not grow in size at all, but was still just a tiny fluff ball. She really did not know what species of a spirit beast it really was, but she liked it quite a lot, so she just continued to keep it by her side. She was just about to undress and go to bed when she suddenly froze in her actions, her gaze turning to a particular spot, her expression seemingly a little impatient, before she went walking outside with light, quiet steps. Her sense of hearing was just too sharp, so she would always come to pick up noises that others were not able to hear. It was the same remote courtyard where Nudie stayed in, but there was never a speck of dust throughout the years. Circle upon circle of ripples splashed across the lake's surface, as if something had fallen into the water. Qingyu walked over there feeling a little suspicious. It was probably that bunch of guys again. What could they really be up to coming all the way here instead of sleeping so late into the night? But when she got closer to the place, she did not see anything at all. Besides the ripples over the water's surface, it was quiet without any other sound. Could she have heard wrongly? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But as she was going to raise her foot to walk away, she felt a chill behind her back, the hair on the back of her neck standing. The weather had been great the past few days, and hence the moon was exceptionally bright and clear. But a huge shadow of something suddenly appeared slowly, gradually blocking out the moon, turning the surroundings a pitch-dark black. She sensed danger that made her skin crawl, like all her blood had suddenly froze, turning her already chilly body temperature an icy cold. What is that? Just when she wanted to turn around to look, a hand suddenly stretched out from the edge of the lake and grabbed onto her ankle, quickly dragging her into the water. At that same moment, the enormous shadow flew fleetingly over the lake's surface at an alarming speed. Chapter 130. 4. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. If Qingyu had not been dragged into the water, she would have been attacked by that thing at this moment. Underwater, the shocked and surprised Qingyu almost swallowed a mouthful of water. Fortunately, she had reacted quickly enough to immediately hold her breath and put up a water isolation barrier, which kept the water out, allowing her to move freely underwater. When she raised her eyes up, she then came to see who the person that had dragged her in was. The culprit's violet eyes were exceptionally dazzling under the night, and they were filled with a smile as they looked at her. "Are you all right? Why are you here?" Qingyu asked in surprise. Lu Junyao curled up his lips. Who did you think it was? For a young lady to not be sleeping so late at night, but had come to such a deserted place like this. Aren't you afraid that you'll meet with danger? Hearing that, a corner of Qingyu's lips twitched and she retorted in an unfriendly tone. This is my house. Why would I not dare to come here? But as for you, I heard that you're somebody of considerable status in Cloud Heaven. For you to break into somebody's house so sneakily in the middle of the night, and is now criticizing me instead, those are actions that ill befits what a gentleman would do. Her words were harsh, and even Su Liemo had turned red upon hearing those words back then. Unexpectedly, she had really underestimated this man's thick hide, as he quietly waited for the young lady to finish before blinking his eyes innocently at her. When have I ever once claimed myself to be a gentleman? Qingyu held back the urge to scold somebody. She was after all a well-brought-up lady, and she would not allow herself to lose her decorum with just a few words from this man. Just what are you guys really up to here? Is there some kind of treasure in this lake? Qingyu asked with her brows tightly knitted up. Every time she wanted to rest, she would come to hear sounds that would not allow her to sleep peacefully. So she had started to think that it was rather strange that they had come to show so much interest in this lake. Lu Junyao's eyes darkened, but he did not speak. There was indeed a treasure in this lake, and it was more precious than any kind of treasure there was. Qingyu saw that he did not seem like he wanted to disclose much, and she did not probe further. She was about to swim back ashore when she was pulled her wrists back down. Due to the buoyancy of the water, that pull dragged her crashing straight into the man's chest. Though the water greatly reduced the impact of the collision, it also pushed the two of them to stick tightly together. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Instinctively, Qingyu was going to struggle, but the man stretched a hand out to clasp around her waist, holding her down firmly in his embrace. Qingyu's body stiffened, and she froze completely. She had never liked to have too much bodily contact with people, and the person she was closest to was just Qingbei, and this man here had repeatedly hugged her. Of course, she was completely aware of the fact that in the few times that she had been injured and fallen unconscious, he had already held her in his arms several times already. Chapter 131. 1. Are you trying to seduce me? Just as anger was rising up inside her heart, she then heard the man's low voice sound out beside her ear. Don't move, it's still up there. Qingyu was taken aback. A black shadow suddenly floated past over the lake's surface, kicking up a series of waves on the water. Qingyu then came to understand why he was not letting her go up, and she did not make any more rash moves, but asked in a soft voice. What is that? Lu Junyao gave a helpless sigh. When I came here earlier, I had clearly not detected the presence of any other living creature like that. But when I used my consciousness to probe the bottom of the pond, it suddenly came out to attack me. Judging from that fella's body and the way it looks, I would say that it is a three-legged devilwing. The three-legged devilwing was a beast that could fly and walk, which looked a little like an eagle, with a malevolent face. It was said that its enormous wings, when spread wide, would be able to block out the sun and the sky, bring darkness wherever it passes. Although the highest level such spirit beasts could reach was only level 10, but it had a trait that was feared, and it really gave people a headache. It bore grudges and was very vindictive. Even among the spirit beasts, few dared to offend the three-legged devilwing. If there was anyone audacious enough to kill a three-legged devilwing, then congratulations to you. From then onwards, that person would be relentlessly pursued and persecuted by the entire three-legged devilwing species. Even if that person were to alter his looks completely, the unique scent that would remain on the person who killed the three-legged would still allow all of them to detect him. Hence, when one encountered this kind of a spirit beast, it would be best that they keep a distance away from them. One would have been puzzled why someone like Lu Junyao, with his level of cultivation, would need to hide himself underwater from a spirit beast of such a low level. So it was actually due to the unforgiving and persistent inborn trait of the three-legged devilwing. Qingyu was just thinking about that when she suddenly could not hold herself back and burst out in laughter. One would not need to think much to know just how depressing it would be for that man at that moment. Lu Junyao saw her laugh, and was a little puzzled for a moment, but he quickly caught on to what she was laughing about. That frustrated him, and he pinched the tender flesh at the young lady's waist as he asked, You dare to laugh? If I had not saved you earlier, you would already have been swallowed up by that thing in one big gulp. But that one pinch caused the two people to freeze in their spots. Lu Junyao seemed to be surprised that the little fox's body was so soft, and her waist was even more slender than before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu was just startled by his actions. How could this man pinch her so blatantly? Putting aside the fact that he had embraced her as the circumstances were dire. But here he is getting more and more overboard. In both her lives, no man has ever dared to do that to her before. The young lady's beautiful eyes looked like they were burning with two balls of flame, as she stared vehemently at him. What? Lu Junyao saw her eyes and arched up an eyebrow to ask. Qingyu gritted her teeth silently, and then said, pausing between every single syllable, Men and women should keep an appropriate distance between themselves. Can you please release your hand? Chapter 131. 2. Are you seducing me? The man's eyebrow raised up higher, and lowered his eyes to look. His hand was still clasped around the young lady's waist at that moment, holding her tightly against him. Their bodies were so close there wasn't even a gap between them, and he could even feel her heartbeat. It was probably because she had been pulled into the water so suddenly, and she had struggled a bit, just now that the young lady's clothes were now in slight disarray. Her tightly bound and closed collar had somehow loosened, opening up slightly, which exposed a patch of fair white skin, and a beautiful set of collarbone, causing the man's deep violet eyes to suddenly dim. He could still recall the time when she had been injured while undoing the curse he had been afflicted with. Her clothes had been stained with blood, and he had wanted to help her change the clothes. But when he saw her beautifully slender neck had no sign of an Adam's apple, that was when he realized that she was really a girl. Her disguise had been so real, deceiving him for such a long time without being discovered, that the handsome, proud, and unyielding youth was actually a beautiful and alluring girl. She had not shown the slightest sign of being a prissy young lady back then. But when dressed in women's clothing, every single one of her gestures and mannerisms was just so enchanting and seductive. Even with her staring at him so furiously now, it was probably because that tiny face was just too exquisitely mesmerizing, her elongated phoenix-like eyes so alluring, that was just so seductive whichever way he looked at her. Lu Junyao then laughed softly, his hand with well-defined lines suddenly covering her eyes. You must not look at me like that all the time. Everything before her suddenly gone dark. Qingyu was taken aback, and she clenched her jaws tightly as she said, "What are you really intending to do? Hasn't anyone told you that your eyes are just too mesmerizing?" The man's low magnetic and sexy voice that was tinged with mirth rolled inside his chest, that felt as if a tiny soft brush gently grazed past her heart. A tingly little feeling. Qingyu went speechless for a moment. Her eyes that were covered blinked a couple of times, her long lashes lightly tickling the man's palm. After a good while, she then said in an emotionless tone, "Do you always tease young ladies like that? You've really opened my eyes to a whole new world. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Lu Junyao sensed that her tone of voice sounded a little cold, and he immediately released his grip, his eyes serious as he looked at her, looking like he minded the fact that she had misunderstood him. "Tease? I have never ever teased any ladies before. What a joke! He was the top man in the dark regions. Would he need to lower himself so much to go tease anyone at all?" Because that woman in the Bright Moon Temple had come to indicate her admiration for him, it caused a rumor to spread like mad throughout the entire cloud heaven, that he was involved with that woman for a period. That made all the other women who had always thrown him coy looks of admiration, or harbored secret wishes, towards him either openly, or secretly to completely give up on any ideas they might have towards him. For no other reason than the fact that any man who caught the sight of the Bright Moon Temple's temple lord, as cloud heaven's greatest beauty of all, how could they possibly hope to compete? They might as well just give up. Because of that incident, Lu Junyao came to feel nothing but utter disgust for women from then on. And any woman who even cast their eyes his way a second time would infuriate him, so much he had wanted to have their eyes dug out. Chapter 131. 3. Are you seducing me? So, something like him teasing young ladies could not possibly exist. Qingyu was stumped for words when she saw the stern and serious expression on his face. It was a while before she managed to find her own voice. "If you haven't done it, then it's all good. Why are you getting so worked up? This is a serious problem," Lu Junyao continued to say very seriously. "In order to avoid having you misunderstand, I have to let you know that the Lord you will come to pledge your loyalty to is a man of upright integrity and strict with himself, who will never ever cause you to be ashamed. So you should really seriously consider it." Qingyu then queried, "Lord? Was she misunderstanding something here? Why can't she understand what he is talking about?" Lu Junyao nodded. "A little crafty fox like you, who is hiding so many secrets inside, and also possess skills in medicine that everyone covets. It is inevitable that you will attract the eye of people with dubious intentions. Only if you come with me to cloud heaven, and remain by my side will I then be able to protect you." Qingyu found herself at a loss for words. Where was this man getting all his confidence from? What does he mean by saying only he can protect her? Qingyu almost burst out laughing from anger, as she looked at him out of the corner of her eye. "I come at a very high price and I fear that you will not be able to afford it." Hearing that, the corners of Lu Junyao's mouth curled up into an incredibly puzzling smile. "I have not much of anything else, but just too much of those things in gold and silver. If you like them, it doesn't matter even if I am to give them all to you." Both he and Bai Jiyan had really given it a lot of thought. seeking to coax her into going to cloud heaven with them. Qingyu just smiled and held his words to heart. She lifted her eyes to look up and saw that the moon had shown itself above. Thinking that the three-legged devilwing must be gone, she moved her body thinking to swim up to the surface. Behind her, the man stared at her back and suddenly parted his lips. "Aren't you curious what is really at the bottom of this lake?" Qingyu paused. Without even turning her head, she replied, "That is your own business, and has nothing to do with me." "What if it does have something to do with you?" Lu Junyao then asked. He was thinking that his guess was highly possibly correct. If it was true, then even if it was merely to make her request to go up into cloud heaven of her own accord, she should be made aware of it. As expected, Qingyu turned herself around when she heard those words, the look in her eyes complicated. "What are you trying to say?" Lu Junyao's lips arched up slightly, and he held her with an arm, bringing her down deeper into the water. Because they were encased in water isolation barriers, they were no obstructed in any way underwater. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Your mother is someone from Cloud Heaven, and you have probably already guessed that. Lu Junyao suddenly said softly. Qingyu acknowledged softly. "Do you wish to see her?" Lu Junyao then asked. Qingyu was stunned. "She is still alive?" As she thought, what Yin Su told her was not the entire truth. Or at least, the part where she died from complications during birth was something she did not believe at all. Chapter 131. 4. Are you seducing me? Lu Junyao saw how careful she was in getting her own hopes up, and he sighed lightly. "She has died, but you also can't really say she is completely dead." "What do you mean?" Qingyu asked with her brows furrowed up, not really understanding what he was saying. Her flesh body is still completely intact, but her spirit soul isn't whole, fragmented and scattered across the various realms. If her spirit soul is fully gathered together, she can then be revived. Lu Junyao explained. After hearing him explain, Qingyu's fingers unconsciously tightened together. Why was her spirit soul broken up? It is a long story, and it encompasses reasons that even I do not know about as well. The tone of Lu Junyao's voice sounded a little helpless, and he then turned to look at her. Pausing for a moment, he then told her. It seemed like it was because of a man. Several chaotic scenes suddenly flashed in Qingyu's mind. One was azure as hell with the sky turned a blood-red shade, a red-clothed woman, and a black-robed man tightly locked in an embrace. The dagger in her hand was plunged in the man's chest, the smile on those lips one of despair, sorrowfully beautiful. Another one was of a man and woman ribbing each other in playful banter. Their fingers interlocked with each other's, their heads together, a joyful scene of happy bliss. These images flashed quickly through her mind, so fast that Qingyu thought that she had been mistaken and had just imagined it. But deep down inside, she just knew that all of that had really happened in the past, as she had seen this several times in her dreams. Because of a man. Qingyu did not want to think any deeper into it, but she has just come to realize something. That man was killed by that woman's own hands, but she had smiled so sorrowfully after that and said, "We can finally be together at last." So after the man died, she had then chosen the most painful way to die. She destroyed all her cultivation, her spirit soul torn viciously apart, to suffer every bit of that brutal and tragic torment. But Qingyu had clearly been able to feel just how much in love they had been. So why had they come to such a sorry end? She did not know how much time had passed, but her feet finally had something to stand on. They had reached the bottom of the lake. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Before them, a gigantic clam shell sat half open, letting out a faint glow of light. A faint translucent figure of a person could be seen lying quietly inside, all curled up and not moving at all. Qingyu froze, like her feet had rooted themselves into the ground, unable to muster up the courage to walk forward to see. It's really here. Lu Junyao's gaze sharpened. After so many years, he had finally found a sliver of Ant Land's aura. It had been so close to where he was, and he had never once thought that the first fragment of the spirit soul he would find would be in a place like this. It was probably because she was unable to leave her very own flesh and blood behind. Chapter 132. 1. Indiscernible palpitations. He turned around to look at the young lady beside him, and saw that the expression on her face a rather grim, and the hands at her sides were unconsciously tightly clenched up, as she stood there in hesitation, not daring to go forward at all, seeming very nervous. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh, and then patted her softly on the shoulder as he said in a gentle voice, "That is just a sliver of a spirit soul, and it does not have its own consciousness, so it would not be able to speak. There is no need for you to be so nervous." Hearing that, Qingyu then lifted her eyes up to look at him. When she received an affirming look from that pair of violet eyes, she then went walking slowly forward. She crouched down lightly, watching that ephemeral sliver of spirit soul carefully. What she saw was really just a human-shaped figure, and its facial features could not be seen, so she was not able to ascertain anything from it. But for some unknown reason, an indescribable feeling came to rise up inside her. There was a sudden feeling of closeness and love, an amazing telepathic touch on the soul. She was suddenly at a loss, not knowing what to do as she had never lost her composure like this before. Her parents from her past life had already left her, before she was even able to see them at all. She had grown up under the care of her very strict grandfather. Grandfather had never showed her any concern with soft and gentle words, but just asked her to work hard on her cultivation, admonishing her harshly with a fierce face when she committed a wrong, and nothing else. Hence, her personality turned to become cold. She did not know what kinship was like. Maybe when she was young, before she came to realize the kind of romantic love Qing Tianlin had towards her, she had foolishly thought that was the kind of care and concern from a kin. At that moment, she remained there in a crouch, staring unblinkingly at the weak glow of the spirit soul. Her gaze was filled with longing, and her eyes were misted over. It was a most natural emotion that arose from deep within, one that she was unable to resist at all. She reached her hand out slowly, wanting to go touch, and a miracle happened right at that moment. Even Lu Junyao's irises had enlarged in incredulity for an instant. The figure whose facial features could not be seen, the spirit soul that did not possess the slightest inkling of consciousness, then suddenly seemed to be drawn to some unseen force, where a part of its hand suddenly moved, slowing rising up, before it slowly moved to come touch the young lady's outstretched hand. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was clear to see that it should have been impossible to touch. The ephemeral spirit soul would surely pass right through. But in that instant, she seemed to have felt the deeply entrenched feelings that poured out from that spirit soul. Lu Junyao. She heard her own voice trembling slightly. How do we bring her away from here? Lu Junyao looked at her through narrowed eyes, and then spread his palm open. A water spirit pearl about the size of a baby's fist suddenly appeared, and the spirit soul inside the clam shell then delved itself inside on its own. This is a soul-nourishing orb. Her spirit soul is too weak, and needs to recuperate in there, Lu Junyao said, and the orb then gradually disappeared from his hand. The two people then swam up to the water's surface, and sat under the lake's central pavilion. Qingyu's eyes were lowered as she stared into the still water, its calm restored. After a long while her voice softly sounded, "Did you know my mother?" Chapter 132. 2. Indiscernible palpitations. She is an elder I greatly respect. Lu Junyao's lips arced up. I have known her for a good 100 years. Hearing that, Qingyu's expression was a little complicated as she looked at him. You're already a few 100 years old. Although she knew that the lifespan of people in cloud heaven was extraordinarily long, but the man before her looked to be only about 20 years old at most. No matter how you look at him, he did not look like a person who had lived for more than 100 years. Lu Junyao's face expressed surprise, and he then said, Cloud heaven is different from the lower-level realms, and the age its people live up to will naturally be much higher. If I remember it correctly, your mother is already more than 300 years old, and you. Speaking up till that point, he then paused, his voice a little grim as he continued. She must have used some special secret technique to prevent you from growing up. Otherwise, You should be at least 50 or 60 years old by now. Qing Yu's eyes grew deep in thought. 50 or 60 years old. But my mother was still around just over a decade ago. According to what Yen Su said, her mother had died from difficulties that occurred during childbirth, and she was now only 14 years old. That didn't really make sense, so what had really happened? That's merely a trick to deceive people's eyes. Lu Junyao said as he shook his head lightly. She has disappeared from cloud heaven for almost 100 years already. So how could it only be just over a decade since it happened? In that instant, it was as if a particular taut string suddenly snapped in her mind, feeling like she had forgotten something very important. Under a blood-colored sky, a beautiful red-clothed woman was kneeling on the ground, a pair of children with exquisite looks carried in her arms. Her face could not be seen clearly, but her lips that were tinged with a faint smile, as she planted a gentle kiss on the foreheads of the two children. I offer 100 years of my cultivation and flesh body up as sacrifice, to seal my children's memories in dust, to halt their growth, for them to reincarnate and change their lives, reborn into a different world, living their lives in peace and joy, free from worry. Mother's children, forgive mother for being so cruel, who hope that you will both grow up safely, and will never ever remember all these painful matters. I'm sorry. If there is a next life, mother will come to you to atone for my sins, but in this life, I cannot leave him to be alone on his own. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU mother loves the both of you. Qing Yu felt a splitting headache in that instant, as the images played out in her mind. The scene was clearly one she had never seen before, but it felt so real, like she had experienced it personally before. Seeing her brows furrow up so tightly and cold sweat had formed on her forehead, Lu Junyao pressed one hand against her back, and a gentle power slowly flowed into her body, that gradually dissipated the pain. Feeling better? Lu Junyao asked with great concern. Qing Yu nodded her head, indicating she was fine. Chapter 132. 3. Indiscernible palpitations. Lu Junyao looked at her and his eyes softened. Leave Aunt Lan's matter to me. Rest assured that you will meet with her one day. It was then that Qing Yu came to realize that he had been addressing her mother as Aunt Lan. She could not help but ask him, "What is her name?" "Your mother's surname is the same as yours. She is surnamed Qing Lanfei." Qing Lanfei. So it turns out that her name from before is not real. She has indeed been reincarnated, and living a different life with many things that have changed. Qing Yu's gaze glinted, and she then said softly, "Thank you." Lu Junyao was taken aback. Thanks for what? This seemed to be the first time he can remember the little fox ever saying these two words to him. Between them, besides the instance where she had saved his life right in the beginning, and she then got drawn into trouble, that almost got her killed while saving him, which evened things out between them. They had made use of each other after that in turns who never called for them to have to use the words "thank you" at all. This time, it was perhaps only because of Aunt Lan that she had come to soften her stance towards him. Hearing that, Qing Yu looked at him seriously and said, "Thank you for being so concerned about my mother. With my current ability, I am not able to resurrect her, but you can. So I am thanking you from the bottom of my heart. I am really not used to seeing you being so courteous," Lu Junyao said with a laugh. This time, Qing Yu did not rebut him but went on to say, "No matter what, I still have to thank you. If you need any help in future, as long as it is within my capabilities, I will definitely do everything I can." He had not thought that things would turn out getting such a promise out from her. What an unexpected pleasant surprise. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But having come to know that she was indeed Aunt Lan's daughter, the great opinion he had had of her all this time now became even more favorable. Even though this little fox was temperamental and blows hot and cold as in when she liked. But it might perhaps be because he had seen too many people who bowed their heads and bent their back before him, trying to win his favor, so this felt rather refreshing to him instead. Of course, he had not really given it much thought, as anyone else who dared to be so disrespectful to him would have already died by 1,000 cuts several hundred times by now. The night grew deeper, and the deep autumn's weather was exceptionally chilly, the cold seeping into one's bones. The young lady was dressed in just a suit of thin white clothes, and her figure was so slender and frail. Moreover, the expression on her face was a little sad at that moment, so she looked just so pitifully helpless. Before he even realized anything was happening, his body was already reacting before anything else. His hand reached up to undo his purple outer robe, and he draped it over the young lady's shoulders. When his eyes came to meet her surprised gaze, he just said with a flinch, "It's cold. Go back and get some rest." Chapter 132. 4. Indiscernible palpitations. Where had Qingyu ever experienced such caring actions from others before? She immediately felt rather awkward, and she reached her hand up to tug at the piece of clothing on her shoulders, about to pull it off and return it to him. "I'm not cold." "Your hands are cold as ice and you're saying that you're not cold," Lu Junyao said as he held the back of her hand, his brows creased together, the expression on his face saying, "You're just lying through your teeth." Qingyu was stumped for words. How was she supposed to explain that it was because she had been practicing the burial soul arts since young, and that was why her body was innately cold? Even on a hot and scorching summer's day, her body would still remain cold and chilly like this. She merely sighed. "All right then. Thank you. I'll return the clothes to you another day." Upon saying that, she then pulled the robe tighter around her and turned to walk out of the pavilion, crossing over the wooden bridge as she left. Behind her, Lu Junyao curled up his lips and suddenly called out, "Little fox." Qingyu halted her steps and turned her head to look at him. Being resistant towards this nickname in the beginning, she had slowly grown numb to it, and became used to hearing him call her that. Although she felt that she was completely nothing like a wolf at all, it was like they were such sly and crafty creatures after all. So how could she possibly be anything like them? She really didn't know what this strange and eccentric man could be thinking. The moon's rays were clear and brilliant, almost seemingly bright as day, and everything surrounding them could be seen clearly. The young lady's pair of long alluring eyes had one corner lifted up slightly as they peered at him, so mesmerizing that they could bring ruin upon cities and countries. One would probably not be able to find another pair of eyes as magically enchanting as hers, where just a brief glance at them would make people willing to offer up everything they had. It was said that the pair of demonic violet eyes belonging to the Lord of the Dark Regions was the most terrifying weapon, and no one dared to meet his gaze. But this young lady's alluring eyes that had a clear limpidness in them were, however, more than that, able to unconsciously put one under an intricate and inescapable spell without anyone knowing a thing. She then just looked at him silently, patiently waiting for him to speak, and in that pair of beautiful-looking eyes, it seemed like they were looking at nothing else but him. That flawless and exquisite face under the silvery glow of moonlight dreamily enchanting, tugging at one's heart unconsciously. Lu Junyao cursed under his breath. This little fox is really as skilled in the art of seduction just like a fox, doing nothing else but just standing there, but making it impossible to ignore that mesmerizing charm she exuded. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She is already like this when she is still so young. When she fully blossoms after a few more years, it would be impossible for any man to resist her charms. No. Maybe not just the men. He still has not forgotten how many girls' hearts the little fox had stolen when she dressed herself up as a man. Qingyu stared puzzledly at the man's changing and unreadable expressions on his face. "What do you want to say? Is it that hard to say it?" Finally, Lu Junyao took a deep breath and looked a little helpless as he said, "It's nothing. I just wanted to say that if you encounter any problems in future, do not hesitate to come find me." Chapter 133. 1. Such displays of affection. It seemed as though he had always spared no effort in delivering himself up to her for use, despite the fact that there were times she did not reciprocate his efforts. Thinking about that, he thought it was probably due to Aunt Lan, and that was why he was exceptionally caring about her. Qingyu's lips curled up, never thinking that he had called out to her just to tell her this. The frown upon her brows immediately eased which lent a stunning radiance to that already beautiful face. She then replied, "Sure." The tone of her voice was filled with a kind of gentleness he had never heard before. Lu Junyao was stunned into a daze for a split moment. For such a cold and indifferent young lady to turn back and reveal such a sincere smile. That one instant felt so gently warm like he had never felt before. A moment he would never forget. On the one eventful night, it seemed a change was silently occurring. The next day, Qing Bei was about to knock on his sister's room door when he discovered that the door was loosely pulled shut, and its occupant seemed to have gone out. He was a little puzzled as he pushed the door to go inside, and he saw that the room was empty just like he had thought. Oh right, except for the sorrowful-looking ball of coal, sitting up upon the soft lounge chair a short distance away, staring into a particular direction diagonally to one side. The large and expressive blue limpid eyes were so sad that it made one's heart wince. Even Qing Bei, who was not one that would quickly succumb to tiny adorable creatures, could not bear to just walk away at that moment, but strode forward to ask in concern, "What's wrong, Meatball? Has she been scolded? That isn't really possible. Sis pampers the little thing so much all the time, so how could she bear to scold her?" Meatball heaved out in a long sigh, and then looked into the worried-looking youth's eyes before it asked, "Mother, might not love me anymore." Qing Bei was befuddled. "What do you mean?" Meatball closed its eyes in deep sorrow, as it stretched a little paw out to point in a particular direction. "I fell asleep last night, and when I woke up, I discovered that Mother was not around, so I thought I should go out to look for her. But Mother came back after a while, and she brought this back." Qing Bei was still feeling rather puzzled as he turned his head to look in the direction the paw was pointed into. That one look then made him freeze in his spot. On the sideboard over there was a neatly folded purple-colored robe, its material exceptionally exquisite and luxurious, and it could be seen from just one look that it was highly expensive, not something that any ordinary person would be able to afford to wear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But that was not the most important point. What's important was that it was men's clothing. Meatball saw him freeze in his spot, and it seemed to find itself at that moment as it went on to complain. "Do you think that Mother has another man outside, and that is why she sneaked herself out in the middle of the night to secretly meet with him? I saw that she was in such a good mood when she came back." Meatball's mouth immediately shriveled up, and it looked like it was going to cry. Meatball only wants Mother, and does not want a father. He will snatch Mother away from me. Qing Bei did not know what to say. It's just a piece of clothing, and the little beast was able to dream up such a ludicrous thing. Chapter 133. 2. Such displays of affection. But that piece of clothing did look rather familiar though. Here he was trying to comfort the overly imaginative and exasperating little thing, when Qing Yu's voice sounded at the door outside. "What are the two of you up to?" She was carrying an exquisite-looking lunchbox, and it looked like it was filled with all kinds of delicious food from the wholesome meal house inside. "Where did you go, sis?" Qing Bei asked as he looked at the beast, who was tugging at his sleeve persistently, as it wiped at the non-existent tears on its face. He then gave a helpless laugh and continued to say, "I saw this little fella looking so pitifully sad and sorrowful when I came here, and I thought that you scolded her." Qing Yu raised up an eyebrow, and then turned to look at that tiny, highly aggrieved little beast. "Didn't you say that you smelled something that moved your heart the last time? It's the Wholesome Meal House's latest product, guaranteed to make one fall in love with it at first bite. Their swallow prawn cake. I went out to buy it for you before daybreak, and here you are feeling so aggrieved." Upon hearing that there was delicious food for it to eat, the little beast's eyes brightened, but still looked a little depressed. Qing Yu was then slightly distressed. What happened to her? She would have immediately pounced upon hearing there was food, but she was holding back, and not moving at all today. Qing Bei's lips stiffened, and he pointed with his chin as he said, "She saw that piece of clothing over there, and has been depressed till now, saying that you have a man outside, and does not love her anymore." Qing Yu then glanced in speechlessness at the brocade robe. She had not had time to keep away. It was quite helplessly tiring to have such a drama queen as a beloved pet at times. Qingyu then looked at the aggrieved-looking little beast with an unreadable smile and said, "I will count to 3, and if you do not come over to eat, I will then throw it all to the dogs in the backyard. 1, 2. She had just counted to 2 when the little beast then leapt over in a flying pounce to snatch the lunchbox away, its face wary as it stared straight at her with its large eyes. "This is meatballs, it is not for the dogs." Qingyu was so tickled by the little beast's antics that she almost broke the facade she had put up to burst out in laughter. But she managed to maintain the cool and indifferent look. "Take it outside and eat. Mother has something I need to discuss with your uncle." "RH." The little ball of coal answered, and then went toddling outside as it turned its head to look back every few steps it took. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingbei could not help it but burst out laughing. After laughing it all out, he had not forgotten to ask about the more important stuff. Does the robe belong to that man in the gathered cloud loft? From what he could remember, there was only that man who had usually worn purple, and was on slightly closer terms to her. "It does." Qingyu nodded, and then considered the matter for a while before she decided to tell him about last night's events. After all, the two of them were twins, and there wasn't anything much that she would be able to hide from him for long. After she told him everything that happened, just as she had expected, Qingbei fell into a daze for a long while. Perhaps he was not able to digest the news that had come so suddenly. Qingyu was in no hurry, and she waited patiently for him to be able to react. Chapter 133. 3. Such displays of affection after a long while. The youth's slightly hoarse-sounding voice then came out from his mouth. "Is our mother really still alive?" Qingyu nodded and said softly to him, "She is still alive, but the journey towards having her come awake might be a long and arduous one." "That does not matter at all. As long as she is still alive, anything is still possible." Qingbei exclaimed with his fists clenched, his voice resolute and determined. "At least she has not really abandoned us, right?" The youth's gaze was a little fervent as he looked at her, like he was very eager to hear her answer. All this while, he had always pined for kinship with an almost mad fervor. Even when he knew that Yen Su was not his biological father all this time, he had wished so hard to gain any little bit of his attention, making himself so petty and small though he was such a proud person deep inside his bones. But he just did not want to accept defeat. Qingyu gave a long sigh and she brushed her fingers gently over his face as she said gently, "Of course it doesn't. Our mother is the best. And no matter what the reason was that she had to leave us, there is one thing we must not forget. She has always missed us." Those words somehow comforted Qingbei's heart, that was filled with frustration and much unease, and his handsome face showed a joyful smile. "I believe it. I have always believed that." To have unexpectedly gained news about their mother, just before they were going to join the Faint Mist sect, it was undoubtedly something to be happy about for them. But with their mother's spirit soul split and scattered over different places, how hard would it be to gather her soul together and have her resurrected? But all those worries was something she did not share with Qingbei. A month's time was not that long nor was it all that short as well. But time was still passing a day at a time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The leaves on the trees turned yellow and gradually fell, except for those plants that did not fear the bitter cold, and continued to bloom throughout the 4 seasons in a year. Greenery grew less and less, turning the place to look desolate and lonely. It was not so bad in places where it was warmer, for the kingdom on the water's edge that was surrounded by the sea on all 4 sides. It was pure ice and snow. Icy snow could be seen piled up everywhere, unmelting throughout the year. Every time winter came, the congealed snow on the mountains would only melt in the subsequent year's summer, so it could be seen just how bitterly cold and unforgiving the weather in the water's edge kingdom was. With such chilly and frozen weather, the water's edge people really wished they could just snuggle up inside their blankets till the season has passed. A lone desolate figure was standing quietly outside the Limitless Sect's doors, tall and well-built. When everyone else were wrapped up in thick and heavy winter clothes, he was dressed only in one single layer, an ink-colored brocade robe, alone and solemn. Snowflakes floated down in thick flurries, falling onto his silver hair, and the figure quickly disappeared from sight in a blink. The ink-colored robe was gradually covered by the flurries of snow, and it was soon impossible to even see its color. That person did not move at all, and it was not known how long he had been standing in the snow, his entire body almost blending in completely together with the snow. Chapter 133. 4. Such displays of affection when Ajin came out from the palace. What met his eyes was that very scene. Dawn was just breaking over the horizon at that moment as daybreak came late in winter. But he still woke up as early as before, not expecting to see that. It was not known when that man had already woken up, and judging from the thick layer of snow on his clothes, it would at least have been 4 hours ago. Although who practiced cultivation possessed spirit energy to protect their bodies, and were not afraid of the cold. But the weather in Water's Edge was not just ordinarily cold. Its temperature many tens of times lower than the winters of most other regions. He was after all a mortal born with a flesh body. So how could he possibly be able to withstand nature's calamity like this? Ajin heaved a long sigh, and went to fetch an umbrella from inside. He opened it up, and then went walking outside. Shielding him from the flurrying snow, Ajin then said, "My lord, it's cold out here. You should go inside." This man had always showed scant care for his own body like this all the time. Especially when he was in a bad mood. He would always like to do something highly extreme like this to cool himself down, and to clear his mind. However, Ajin would very much rather he be like what people outside said he was. A brutal and bloodthirsty murderer, who killed without batting an eye. As when he was like that, he would at least be able to vent out everything he held suppressed inside, and not let it pile up inside his heart day after day, where he would then grow to become more depressed and grim. Qing Yili felt his thoughts being dragged back from a faraway distant place, and his dark green eyes were half narrowed. His eyelashes that were longer and lusher than a woman's were covered in a layer of frost, because they had not moved for a long period of time, and when he blinked, tiny specks of snowy glitter fell from his eyes. He raised his eyes up to gaze far into the horizon, like he was seeing a certain place, or a particular person there. Winters come so soon. The cold and clear magnetic voice sounded out softly. Ajin was taken aback, and he then said with a laugh, "My lord, you are in the Water's Edge Kingdom, and this is already your 14th year here. Haven't you gotten used to the early winters that come to the Water's Edge?" Under the cover of the mask, his expression could not be seen, but just his voice could be heard. So 14 years have passed. So he had muddled through so many years in what felt to be just a blink of an eye. He had once thought to live through this dull and insipid life, just like that till the day he dies, never having once thought that the heavens would actually still care about him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yili's gaze suddenly softened. He then said, "Ajin, tidy up everything there is to deal with here in this place quickly. I want to return to her side as soon as I can." Ajin naturally knew who Qing Yili was talking about. The portrait that had been carefully kept for so many years. One that other people were not allowed to even take a single glance at. The one person whom the man kept right at the tip of his heart. He could still remember just before they left, when the man had held the young lady in his arms. His eyes had quietly turned red at the rims. The man who had always been cold and heartless, one who did not care about anything before his eyes, had seemed to give all his warmth and feelings onto just this one person. It was a look no one had never seen before, a highly moving scene. Chapter 134. 1. It likes the roasted rabbit I make in a blink. The day of the recruitment trials for the 3 great sects was nearing. The moment one stepped out through the doors, they would be able to see clear changes on the streets, where people of the pugilist world, from all kinds of sects and clans could be seen. The usually peaceful imperial capital was also bustling with activity. Business at the tea house in front of the gathered cloud loft had always been dismal, but as the weather turned cold, it was now bursting with customers every day in the recent period, as all the pugilist warriors who had been on the roads and come in from long journeys needed a place to rest their feet, and enjoy a hot cup of tea to warm their bodies, and to catch up on the recent major events that happened in the world. In one of the rooms, several people were seated around a table, and one of them said in a mysterious tone, "Did you guys hear? Something big happened in the Faint Mist sect." "What big thing happened?" the others asked curiously. The man gazed around him, and then said in a whisper, "I have a cousin who was a disciple of the Faint Mist sect before." The several other people then went tisk, in chorus as they rolled their eyes in contempt. "You call that something big? What's so astounding about that?" "At least let me finish first. My cousin was one of the inner circle disciples among the top 100 holding the 50th rank." The man continued to say in exasperation, "But do you all know? He was considered to be rather respected in the sect, and had not returned for 3 whole years already, but just a few days ago, he suddenly came back and he said." "What did he say? Tell us quick." Just as he got to the most important part, the man suddenly stopped. He was really asking for a beating, keeping them all on tenterhooks. The man turned his eyes to gaze at everyone, and then said, "He said that he has been thrown out by the sect." Hearing that, the several people there were greatly shocked. For a person to be ranked among the top 50, should rightfully possess significant powers. So why would they be driven out? Could the Faint Mist sect have something big up their sleeves? And I heard from my cousin that the total number of disciples in the Faint Mist sect added up together now, including the ones who have not returned from their journeys, comes up to less than 300 people. The several people became even more shocked. Why have their numbers decreased by so much in such a short period of time? I remember that the Faint Mist sect has the greatest numbers among the 3 great sects, and they should at least have 600 or 700 people. They've decreased their numbers by more than half in one single stroke? What could the Faint Mist sect have up their sleeves? I heard that most of them who were driven out were disciples who did not meet the mark, and the top 5 ranking experts had returned to the Faint Mist sect to hold the fort. I think that the admission trials for this year's recruitment will definitely be very hard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Even your cousin who was in the top 50 ranks is deemed inadequate, much less any of us here. I think we'll not be able to even make it past the first round." A man said mournfully, "Isn't that so true? Who doesn't know how ridiculously powerful the Faint Mist sect's top 5 are? I heard that they want to recruit 50 people this time round, but I think they would be lucky to even get 20. If the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials are going to be so difficult, I think we had better go to the Limitless sect, or the Carefree Valley instead. We'll stand a better chance." Chapter 134. 2. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. You do not seem to be surprised in the slightest. Bai Zhiyan said with interest as he looked at the young lady before him. Qingyu held a teacup in her hand as she listened intently to the conversation of the people downstairs, her face highly unimpressed. Having heard Bai Zhiyan, she then turned her gaze onto him and replied, "There's nothing surprising about that. Winners stay and losers leave, perfectly normal." Bai Zhiyan raised an eyebrow, and then leaned in a little closer. "Are you really going to the Faint Mist sect? Do you have a particular motive?" He would obviously not think that the lass was going there purely out of boredom, and was just seeking fun. Moreover, with the powers she possessed, she would not be able to learn anything in there. That just left one reason. There was something in there that she was interested in. Qingyu looked at the handsome-looking face leaning in that was filled with curiosity. She just curved up the corner of lips, and said indifferently to that face filled with anticipation, "Heaven's secrets must not be revealed." Bai Zhiyan gave her a pleading look. "Well, already on such familiar terms, what reason is there to hide? How disappointing." Especially after he got to know from Lu Junyao that she was Aunt Lan's child. Their relationship had been drawn closer together, and the last attitude towards them had improved tremendously. But just this trait of liking to keep people in suspense that wasn't all that adorable. "I heard that the Faint Mist sect is very strict. Once you go in there, I don't know how many years it will be before we'll be able to meet again," Bai Zhiyan said sadly, and there was even a tinge of reluctance in his voice. Hearing that, a corner of Qingyu's mouth twitched, and she looked at him speechlessly. It wasn't as if she would not be able to come out at all, and here he was saying it like they would soon be parted in death. He is really just as dramatic as that little ball of fur she had back home. Qingyu then pushed the cup in her hand towards him, interrupting his sorrowful and depressing thoughts. Porty, are you ordering me around like a waiter now? Bai Ziyan said with a laugh despite himself. Really don't know from who she had picked up this personality trait from. Like she was born with a silver spoon waiting to be served. Really cast from the exact same mold as that fella Lu Junyao. But having come to know her identity, Bai Ziyan was a little more willing to indulge her, the way a senior would care for a junior. Tisk. Little lass, don't you know well enough to wear a little more when the weather turns cold? Your hands are like ice cubes. Bai Ziyan had accidentally brushed her fingers when he took the cup from her, and he was surprised by the biting chill he had felt. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yuhi immediately raised an eyebrow and started to admonish sternly. You might still be a young little lady, but do not just care about looking good all the time. You are dressed so thinly, and if you come to spoil your body's constitution from the cold, you will surely regret it in the future. Qingyu was at a loss for words. He's acting so much like a benevolent father showing concern for his daughter. With that thought in mind, she just blurted out. Bai Ziyan, you will surely make a great father in future. Great father? Bai Ziyan was befuddled, his mind suddenly blank, unable to react to her words. Chapter 134. 3. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Qingyu pressed her lips together and smiled. She was just about to say something, when someone came up from behind and stuffed something round into her arms. It was warm to the touch but not scalding, its temperature just right. Her eyes blinked in surprise as she raised her head to look up. What met her eyes was a perfectly chiseled jaw, its skin clear and flawless. Seeing her raise her head, his lips curved up slightly to reveal a faint smile. Knowing that she's cold, if you have time to be gabbing so much nonsense, didn't you think to grab a warmer instead? Lu Junyao said without any expression on his face, as he sat down on the other side of the table. Bai Ziyan just stared at him, unable to speak. Did he just imagine seeing that man smile faintly and acting so gentle? Why has his face immediately turned so cold and heartless the very next instant? Although the weather is getting colder, winter isn't here yet. Who would use a warmer now? Bai Ziyan sputtered to say, his face crying tearlessly. The man just looked at him expressionlessly, the mesmerizing violet eyes tinged with a glint of displeasure, which quickly shut him up in terror. All right, you're the great lord, so anything you say has to be right. Next time I'll definitely keep a sharp lookout for that, alright? Sheesh. You were already so protective in the past. And now you've gone from bad to worse that you're shielding her so unreasonably. Qingyu lowered her eyes to look at the small and intricate little warmer in her arms, not knowing what was inside. But there was a faint fragrance, a highly comforting scent. The corners of her mouth unconsciously lifted, and she said a soft word of thanks to him. The faint Miss Sex recruitment trials is 3 days away? Lu Junyao asked. Qingyu nodded. Yes. As the journey there is rather long, I will be setting off tomorrow. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao acknowledged with a nod, and then turned to Bai Ziyan to say, transform the lightning blaze unicorn back tomorrow. Hearing that, Bai Ziyan was startled a moment, and it was a good while before he was able to react. From the moment they came back from Hades Canyon, the unfortunate beast was shrunk back into its original basic form by Lu Junyao. From its magnificent and valiant massive size, it was shrunk to become as big as a kitten, its looks ambiguous and of undeterminable species, a laughable sight. It had lived among the common cats and dogs for the past few months, but as it was too ugly looking, it was ostracized by all the other animals, with none of them willing to play with it, greatly despising its repulsive looks. This caused the great and resplendent 12th level high-grade spirit beast to be greatly humiliated, but was helpless as its spirit powers were sealed up when it was shrunk. It was damningly unable to overpower even a useless stray, living a pitiful beastly life. To think that the pathetic beast that had been dumped in some unknown corner waiting for mushrooms to grow, had actually not been entirely forgotten by its owner. Chapter 134. 4. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Bai Jiyan felt that the fellow was really unlucky, and his face was sympathetic as he shook his head sadly. Transform it back and then? Lu Junyao's gaze did not waver, and his tone was calm as he said, let the lightning blaze unicorn pull the horse carriage, and send little fox to the faint mist sect tomorrow. Bai Jiyan had not yet swallowed his mouthful of tea, and he immediately choked when he heard that, coughing till his handsome-looking face was red. It was a good while later before he was able to recover and say, why do you want to make the lightning blaze unicorn pull the carriage? That fella is so haughty, it will never be willing to. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow slightly, and his alluring pair of violet eyes glinted beautifully with a light. You just go tell it their death is not the most terrifying thing in this world. It will be more terrifying when a level 12 high-grade spirit beast comes to finds itself being eaten up by a lowly stray cat. Bai Jiyan could only silently light a candle in his heart for a particular beast, for its beastly pitiful life. This is one truly venomous man. But at the same time he came to really see just how much Lu Junyao valued Qingyu. The lightning blaze unicorn had merely accidentally injured her back then, and it was made to suffer such a cruel punishment. The man must really respect this elder of his a lot, and that is why he is so concerned for her child. But he would probably also do the same as well. Who asked the last to possess such extraordinary skills in both medicine and martial arts? Even the little tantrums she threw occasionally was so adorable. She was just so marvelous. And just looking at that exquisitely beautiful face, who could really get angry at her? Looking at Bai Jiyan's face that was at such a loss, Qingyu then opened her mouth to say, no need to trouble yourself. I'll just take the regular horse carriage. The lightning blaze unicorn is a high-grade spirit beast, and has its own mind and consciousness. Such types of beasts are hard to tame, as they have extremely proud hearts. Doing this to it will be just too humiliating. Lu Junyao laughed softly. You do not need to worry, it will feel humiliated. If it was anyone else, that creature will surely throw a fit. But if it's you, it will be most happy to do it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Qingyu was taken aback by surprise. Why? That time back in Hades Valley, when it lost control of itself and went out on a mindless massacre, it still did not strike you directly. Even when you fell off the cliff at the end, it had even wanted to leap down to go save you. Lu Junyao himself found it rather incredulous when he spoke about that, and he shook his head with a smile. Although I do not know the real reason, but it really likes you. Hence even when he punished the spirit beast severely when they came back, and the beast had felt angry and highly aggrieved, it still knew that it had done something wrong, so it merely endured it all silently. Qingyu was silent as she heard him finish. She thought about it very seriously for a while, and then lifted her eyes to say, maybe. It just likes the roast rabbits I make. Lu Junyao was speechless. Chapter 135. 1. Narcissism needs to be treated the next day. Outside the Duke of Eternal Peace Manor, the two royal concubines were holding their daughters' hands, reluctantly bidding them goodbye. They even secretly stuffed quite a significant amount of money from their own secret stashes, afraid that they would be bullied by others in the Faint Mist sect, where there was no one to look after them. On the other side, Yin Su merely reminded the twins, Qing Yu and Qing Bei, to give it their all, and to help each other out together with Yen Ning Luo after they get in, for them to become closer to each other. He told them that Yen Ning Luo had been inside for quite a number of years already anyway, and would have established relations, so she would be able to take care of them a little as well. Qing Yu merely smiled without saying a word, while Qing Bei went on to acknowledge, to make it a little less awkward for Yin Su. Because there were 4 of them altogether, Yin Su had specially arranged for the widest and most comfortable horse carriage in the manor for them, to bring to the Faint Mist sect. But just as he was about to get someone to drive the carriage out, she suddenly heard the sound going clippity-clop, coming in from a distance away. Everyone could not help themselves, but craned their necks out to look. What they saw immediately caused their eyes to bulge. They saw a horse carriage being slowly driven round a bend. The body of the entire black carriage car incredibly sleek, simple and luxurious. Tassels embroidered with threads of gold trimmed the sides of the roof, which was a really nice touch. But what was most surprising was that the horse right at the front looked really special, although its body was no different from any other horse. But they just could not help but feel that something seemed a little off. The horse carriage came to a stop slowly in front of them. The driver was a handsome and rather good-natured looking man. Qingyu then came to recall that it was the man who had been standing at the doors and was sleeping with his eyes wide open when she went to the gathered cloud loft on one occasion. Seeing that, Yansu took a couple of steps forward and opened his mouth to ask, "And this gentleman is?" The man smiled, but his gaze was looking at the young lady behind Yansu. "By the orders of my lord, I came here to escort Miss Qingyu to the Faint Mist sect." The moment those words came out, several pairs of eyes immediately turned to fix upon Qingyu, to looking at her measuringly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU standing at the side, Qingyu lifted an eyebrow, and her eyes were fixed upon the strange-looking full jet black horse with the bright sleek coat. It was trampling its hooves impatiently in spot, snorting loudly through its nostrils, like it had nowhere to vent its frustrations, and was feeling highly aggrieved. That guy Lu Junyao really has turned it into a horse to pull the carriage. I wonder who might be your lord. Yansu was still a little worried, although he did not know what kind of an acquaintance Qingyu might have come to make outside. But just by looking at the man driving the carriage, and the subtly muted luxury of the highly expensive carriage, that seemed to be more than what it looked like on the surface, he knew that the person must possess an extraordinary background. Though the last did indeed possess some great capabilities, but she was after all still very young, and would fall for the deceit of people with impure intentions. The coachman was just able to say something when Qingyu interrupted by voicing out, "It's a friend of mine, and father does not have to worry about it. This friend of mine is someone trustworthy and moreover." Chapter 135. 2. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. Her gaze fixed upon the strange horse. She contemplated for a while on the approach to take before she slowly opened her mouth to say, "The steed is actually a spirit beast, and its legs takes it over long distances very quickly, several times the speed of ordinary horses. It is also vert steady, and I think my 2 elder sisters will not be able to tolerate a bumpy ride filled with too many jolts. So let us just take this carriage instead." The moment they heard that the carriage would not jolt, Yan Shiwu was already subconsciously nodding her head in agreement. "That's right, father. We'll just take this carriage. Since it's a friend Qingyu's, our dear little sister, everything will be fine." Beside her, Yan Shiro also quipped softly in agreement. Hearing that, what else could he possibly say? He could only look at Qingyu thoughtfully as he weighed the situation, and then reminded them of a few things before he let them leave. The few of them climbed up into the carriage, but Qingyu did not move, standing right in front of the horse carriage, as she looked at the unfortunate beast looking extremely grumpy. She then reached her hand out suddenly and stroked the beast's head as she said in a gentle voice, "This must be so hard on you." The eyes of the man driving the coach almost popped out of his head as he stared. "This little young miss is such a bold one. She dares to go touch a lightning blaze unicorn." It must be known that the horn on its head was the strongest weapon throughout the beast's body, so their heads must never ever be touched. That spot was an absolute taboo for anyone except for its owner, and whoever else touches it would definitely be killed. The man broke out in a bout of cold sweat from fright, and he was already thinking in his mind whether he should go back to fetch help, as he would not be able to control an enraged lightning blaze unicorn like this with his own power alone. Moreover, he had heard that this young miss was highly valued by the lord, so if she should come to meet with any harm, wouldn't his head be made to shift house? But who would have thought? That fellow was unexpectedly calm, and did not make a single sound, but just stared with its beastly eyes flared wide, and its face in shock at the young lady before it. Qingyu laughed, and stretched her hand out to stroke its head once more. "Although I tried my best to refuse, but your lord's mind was set, and he was just too stubborn. So in order to make it up to you, Why not I roast a rabbit for you next time? And I'll throw in a chicken as well? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Almost the same moment that she had just finished her words, the pair of beastly eyes then blinked happily, and then blinked at her again, before it obediently nudged its head against the young lady's palm, docile and tame. The man driving the coach was nearly blinded by that sight. Goodness! Was the person he saw just earlier who accidentally touched the lightning blaze unicorn's body, and then died a violent death when the beast drove its horn right through the man's body just in hallucination. After having appeased the lightning blaze unicorn, Qingyu then climbed herself up into the carriage. She had just pulled the curtain aside to step inside when she froze in her spot. Chapter 135. 3. Narcissism needs to be treated. She saw that the insides of the carriage had a thick layer of snowy white covering spread over the floor, seeming to be the fur of some kind of spirit beast. So even if one were to fall, it would not hurt. Placed right in the middle was an ornate little low table, with tea and several dishes of snacks. In a corner at the foot of the table, there was also a small intricate little warmer. Qingyu's eyes glinted sharply, and the voice of the man driving the coach suddenly came in. Miss Qingyu, my lord said that you should keep the warmer by your side, and when it isn't warm anymore, you just have to add some fire spirit grass for it to work. There's a small box under the table, and you'll find some of that inside. Hearing that, she then saw that there was indeed a small square box under the table. Actually, there was some warmth in the carriage itself, and it was not cold at all. But it was just that Qingyu's body was always cold, and at such a low temperature. Hence, even if it was warm in there, she did not feel it at all, as she had become so used to it, not feeling cold at all. But it was after all done with good intentions. Qingyu carried the warmer in her hands, and then said softly, "Can I trouble you to convey my thanks to your lord when you go back?" The man outside the carriage said in a bright voice with a smile, "The young miss need not be so courteous. My lord owes you for having saved his life, and all these does not require much effort at all. So it's nothing worth mentioning." And Qingyu did not respond any further to that. But Yan Shiwu, who was seated right beside her, shuffled over to her, and asked in very softly, "Is this from that man from the gathered cloud loft?" Although she wasn't really sure, but she just had a feeling it was him in her heart. Back at the Hades Valley, she had seen just how attentive that man had been towards Qingyu. Although she had initially been highly jealous, she was now just filled with envy. Qingyu raised an eyebrow, but wasn't surprised that she was able to guess it correctly, but just replied to her with a simple, "Yes." Yan Shiwu's expression showed a triumphant, "Just as I thought." But her heart felt a sense of sourness that came out of nowhere. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the man, whose looks were so good-looking that he might be immortal, and was too deep and profound to decipher, who viewed the entire world to be beneath him. How could he not even give her a single glance, but was so friendly and amicable to Qingyu, showing her the utmost care and concern? She pursed up her lips, and then turned to Qingyu to ask, "Have you come to like that man?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu's gaze sharpened, and the expression on her face was baffled. "What?" Yan Shiwu assumed that she just wasn't ready to admit it. "Even if you have not, that man definitely likes you." Qingyu did not say a word, but just looked at her silently. Yan Shiwu then became even more depressed as her slim fingers caressed her own face. "I am clearly also so beautiful as well, but he did not even glance at me once. And then looking at you here." Yan Shiwu was just about to pick on any shortcomings, but when she saw that absolutely flawless and perfect-looking face, she fell silent, finding herself at a loss for words. After a while, she then said, "Besides just that face, your temperament is not as soft and enchanting as mine. And you know nothing about needlework, music and chess, skills a respectable fair lady must possess. So why had he come to have taken a liking to you?" Chapter 135. For narcissism needs to be treated. Qingyu was speechless. Narcissism is an illness. Needs to be treated. The horse carriage drawn by a high-grade spirit beast was just amazing. Not only did they feel the least bit of queasiness, even when they were traveling over bumpy and uneven mountain roads, it felt as if they were on flat ground. The entire journey peaceful and uneventful. The journey to the Faint Mist sect was far and distant, and it required at least a day's time even by fast horses. But although it was clear to see that the lightning blaze unicorn clearly had not traveled at a very fast speed, they had somehow come to reach the foot of the mountain, to go into the Faint Mist sect in less than a day. Quite a good amount of people have come to gather at the place in succession, as an appointed disciple from the Faint Mist sect would come to lead the way when the time came, to settle them into an inn at the foot of the mountain for the time being. They would wait till it was time for the trials, before they would be allowed inside the sect. Hence, even if these people have arrived an entire day earlier, they would not be able to enter yet. There was a rather large inn at the foot of the mountain, and it had no problems accommodating a few hundred people. The only thing that was not good about it was that the condition of the inn wasn't exactly in good shape, being located in the wilderness. The furniture and beds looked extremely simple and crude, and the food served was bland and tasteless. The young youths who were so used to splendid clothes and luxurious food were naturally unable to put up with such poor and dilapidated conditions, immediately breaking out in complaint. "Tisk, are all you brats here to sightsee and leisure? There is only this one single inn of mine within a 100-mile radius of the Faint Mist sect. You can jolly well choose not to stay. Just leave, and I will not be seeing you off." From the back of the main hall, a woman about 30 years of age dressed in plain and simple clothes said, her face clean and free from any rouge or powder. She seemed to be a gentle and harmless woman, but just for a pair of sharp and intelligent eyes. She cast her gaze out of the corner of her eyes scathingly as she looked upon the crowd outside the inn, and then curled up a corner of her mouth in a meaning smile before she said, "Don't complain that I did not remind you. There is nothing else here at night, but just a good number of hungry wolves and ferocious large cats. You can still make it if you leave now. Otherwise, when it turns dark, who knows what will happen." She said that with an evil smile on her lips, and did not speak another word after that. The next second, all the youths who had been complaining with utter contempt and disdain suddenly all surged themselves forward in a rush, fighting to be ahead of the others as they hollered, "Proprietor!" Chapter 136. 1. Frankly expressed goodwill. The voice was clear and pronounced, tinged with an innate aloofness and noble. The woman was taken aback a moment, and she then raised her eyes up, to see an exquisite and flawlessly beautiful young lady, with the edges of her mouth slightly curved up. Her long upswept phoenix-like eyes had a hint of a smile in them, neither too passionate nor cold. In that chilly weather, she was dressed only in thin white clothes, extremely eye-catching among the crowd, especially her highly outstanding looks. The woman then looked at the clear bright-colored crystal on the countertop, and her eyes narrowed. If she was not mistaken, that was the crystal core of a level 6 spirit beast at the very least, which would fetch a high price of some tens of millions in the black market. Enough to buy several inns that was bigger than this one she had. She thought that maybe the young lady did not know the value of the gem, and had ignorantly just taken out such a precious treasure. Although she loved money quite a lot, but she would never want to cheat ignorant young ladies like this. She went on to push the crystal gem back with a stern expression, although feeling a little reluctant, but she held on to her principles. "Little missy, this is worth too much, and I do not have any crystal gems of sufficient value to give back as change, and neither do I have enough cash on hand." Qingyu was a little surprised. She had thought that the money-loving proprietress would have accepted it, never expecting that she would take the moral stand, and the smile on her face immediately deepened slightly. "The proprietress must accept it. It is affinity that we've come to meet, and let's just take it as a token of our newfound friendship." The woman was startled for a moment. The young lady looked like she was a pampered and sheltered young miss from a rich family, and she had not thought that the young lady would know how to deal with people so well, and had such a generous hand. She had always liked people like this. With that thought in her mind, the woman then smiled and said, "In that case, I will accept it. I have never been a wishy-washy person. Besides me, There are 4 other waiters in this inn. My name is Qiao Wei, and you can call me Sister Wei. Qing Yu nodded with a smile, and then called her Sister Wei. Qiao Wei's eyes curved into 2 crescents, and her lips turned up into a smile. Although she did not possess an exactly stunning or particularly unforgettable countenance, she was still highly good-looking when she smiled, a look that cheered people's hearts to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Money Leopard. Bring this young lady here to our best room, and make sure to serve them well. As Qiao Wei's voice fell, a tall thin man came walking over. His long thin face was all smiles as he said eagerly, "Will the young missy please follow me?" Qing Yu nodded slightly. Seeing that, Qing Bei, Yan Shiwu and Yan Shiro beside her immediately turned to follow them upstairs. It was not till the few of them have disappeared from sight that the other people in the inn snapped back to their senses, one of them shouting out in rage, "Innkeeper! I was clearly the first to ask for your best room. Why did you give it to someone else? Don't you know what is first come first served?" The ear-deafening roar was tinged with a slight measure of oppressive spirit power, and quite a number of them felt woozy from the reverberating voice. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.